The CNBC app. Global market news in one place. Customizable sections and personalized alerts. Stocks tracking, interactive charts and market insights all in your hands. Stay connected. Stay informed. Download the CNBC app today.
Welcome to Squawk Box Europe. I'm Karen Cho with Steve Sedgwick in London and Annette Weisbach in Sintra. These are your headlines.
ECB President Christine Lagarde opens the Sintra Forum defending June's rate hike as necessary to fend off inflation pressures. But she insists the ECB won't need the same force as during the last inflation shock.
We no longer need to reach for unconventional instruments. While we have them at hand, we can now focus on stabilizing inflation with policy rates as our primary tool. Monetary policy has gone back to basics.
We'll have special coverage from Sintra throughout the morning. The US Supreme Court rules that President Trump does not currently have the power to fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, but could do in the future.
Doha diplomacy in question as the US-Iran issue mixed messaging yet again around the prospect of fresh talks in the Qatari capital. President Trump doubling down on assertions the war has been won.
We're winning militarily. It's almost won militarily, I would say. And it's really very simple. It's the denuclearization of Iran.
Back to basics. That's the message that ECB President Christine Lagarde had for investors as the central bank's annual conference kicked off in Sintra, Portugal. Speaking Monday evening, Lagarde looked to differentiate between now and the ECB's policy aggression in 2022.
We no longer need to reach for unconventional instruments. While we have them at hand, we can now focus on stabilizing inflation with policy rates as our primary tool. We no longer need to act with the same force. We can make measured adjustments to rates, calibrated to the shocks we face, and we no longer need complex forms of forward guidance. Our decisions are data dependent and taken meeting by meeting. So monetary policy has gone back to basics.
Let's get to Annette for more. Annette, the retreat in the oil price, just giving a little bit more breathing room to the Governing Council. But for me, the question is, who's the most hawkish in the room now? Because we were talking the other day to Bank of America that is suggesting perhaps 3 rate hikes from the US Federal Reserve this year versus, of course, now what we're seeing from the ECB in terms of that language.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think when we talk about the ECB, the most hawkish person in the room will probably be Isabel Schnabel, who already stepped out recently saying more rate hikes are needed given the inflation picture. But also what Philip Lane was saying recently, that he thinks that prices will stay at an above target level for the foreseeable future, is more in the hawkish camp. And so even though the oil price is now coming back, I think the ECB will still stick to at least 1 hike. And of course, everything kind of as well a little bit depends on the inflation data. We had inflation data yesterday from Spain, which came in hotter than expected. Today, we get France and Germany. France roughly in half an hour, 45 minutes times. And then we get Germany around lunchtime. And this will already give us more of a picture whether we see inflation coming back to what is expected or whether the inflation pictures actually, or inflation pressures actually building up. So it kind of depends whether the ECB would then hike in July or in September. I guess the majority in the market is now expecting July is off, but then September seems very much as a live meeting. Here in Sintra, though, they will not only talk about monetary policy going forward, the main topics are AI and also boosting productivity, especially AI and these huge investments into the space, and now also through debt instruments, like we've seen recently through SpaceX, is a big topic because, of course, the Bank of International Settlement as well over the weekend published that report that AI could actually be a threat to financial stability. So, and here on the ground, the ECB, also during a prominent panel, is trying to find out how that all factors in then also for financial stability, but also monetary policy. I had the pleasure to speak to Tobias Adrian, who is the chief financial economist of the IMF, just like moments ago, and I asked him what he thinks, which role does AI and all the investments play for financial stability. Take a listen.
I think we have seen strong profitability of many different firms. So these include the hyperscalers, but also some of the pure artificial intelligence firms. But it's a whole complex, right? It's the memory chips, it's the hardware, it's the hyperscalers. So yes, profitability has been strong, but as you're alluding to, there's also a ratcheting up of debt, right? So there's more and more, not just equity financing, but also debt financing of hyperscalers, of other infrastructures in the technology world. And then this question arises, you know, technology is moving very quickly, but the depreciation rates that are, you know, that we may see may lead to faster depreciation, but of course the debt is long term, right? So there's a maturity mismatch there.
So yesterday evening, Christine Lagarde was telling the world that Europe is a much more resilient place, also because financial regulation has made the banking system more sound. Now with AI, this resilience actually could be tested because the newest models from Anthropic, we all know, do find a lot of loopholes also in financial institutions, financial security, cyber security, and that is a topic here on the ground as well. And the big question, how should regulators actually respond to that renewed threat to financial stability through AI, large language models, and how can they keep up to speed with the rapid evolution of that technology? That's the AI topic. Another big topic here is productivity and how to boost that. That is, of course, closely tied to the technology and to AI, because clearly there is a lot of hope that AI can also boost productivity here in the euro area, where this has been notoriously much lower than the one in the United States. And next to that, of course, the topic of what is next for U.S. monetary policy, and the first appearance of Kevin Walsh, the new Fed president, here in Sintra, outside the United States tomorrow, will be the big topic here on the ground. So whether he'll remain to be concentrated on inflation and will more or less vindicate the priced-in rate hike of the Fed during the course of until the end of the year, or whether he will not be that hawkish in a way as he was appearing in the press conference in the States. So these topics make Sintra a very interesting event this year round.
Lovely work. Is it as windy as it looks? It looks rather breezy there.
It is very cold and windy, as always. They have a microclimate, Steve, as always, and we keep on forgetting that.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you. I forgot to ask you, did you see the football scores last night? Sorry, I missed them. Did you check out the football score? No. I can inform Germany
you know
aren't in the World Cup.
I woke up and I said, listen, I have to check the football scores because you will ask me about it.
Yeah.
So I know I didn't see it. It was too late for me. I had to sleep.
No.
But it will add to the German depression about the economy, about football.
No, the German retail sales were really good this morning. They just spent loads of money for once. But yeah, Germany aren't in the World Cup.
It was before the football.
You don't have to worry about the football anymore. You're not involved. But lovely. Brilliant coverage. Enjoy the weather. It's a heat wave here as well. So England are in the World Cup and it's a heat wave. Fantastic coverage. Catch up with you later. She's off. She's gone. I didn't even mention the Dutch for all our Dutch friends as well. They're out as well.
Germans blown off course. That's just what happens occasionally.
Do you want to talk about soccer?
No. We've got a really busy agenda this morning. Shall we move on?
The US and Iran have issued wildly conflicting messages. Around the possibility of fresh talks in Qatar. US President Donald Trump said Iran has requested a meeting which will take place in Doha today, but Tehran says no such talks are planned. Dan joins us around the desk. Dan, I don't mean to be trivial about this, but the Iranian delegation and the US delegation, they're as bad as each other. They are talking beneath the surface, but on the surface it's like, you told us you wanted a meeting. No, you said you were. We deny. It's kind of like, dare I say, it's almost quite childish, the public protestations from both parties compared to actually the progress we think might be happening beneath the surface.
That's exactly right. I think it's a fair point as well. And a lot of this also playing out on social media, on platforms like X, for example, where each individual faction is also being given its own voice, and that really distorts the reality on the ground. Nevertheless, both sides are sending teams to Doha today, but Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson has pushed back on the idea that any face-to-face talks are actually scheduled. Tehran saying its delegation's trip to Doha has no relation to this US visit. Now, as I mentioned, this type of confusion really common when so many factions inside Iran are competing for a voice. A source with direct knowledge of the talks has told CNBC that technical teams are scheduled to meet today and communication channels created to de-escalate any incidents are in place. Now, it's still unclear who is attending the talks on the Iranian side, but as for the US delegation, President Trump says he's sending son-in-law Jared Kushner and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. But the president, interestingly, was pretty non-committal when he was asked overnight if he thought this summit would actually deliver a breakthrough.
Oil prices are way down. We hit $69 today. It was higher than that prior to the denuclearization of Iran fight that we have, which we're doing very well. There'll be a meeting on that tomorrow in Doha. And to go into Qatar, I think they've already left, or they're just about getting ready to leave. So we'll see how that goes. But we're doing very well on that front. But the meeting in Doha is going to be perhaps important, perhaps not. We're going to find out. But we're winning militarily. It's almost won militarily, I would say. And it's really very simple. It's the denuclearization of Iran. We don't want them to have a nuclear weapon, and they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. They've agreed to that, in all fairness.
President Trump there. So while a pause on the kinetic strikes has been agreed, today's priority in Doha is preventing another flare-up. And I spoke with the Secretary General of the International Chamber of Shipping this morning, who of course represents about 80% of the world's merchant fleet. He said it's still too unsafe to get shippers through Hormuz given the risk, including the big risk that he flagged this morning, which was mines still in the waterway. He also said any Iranian plan floated today to charge fees or tolls is simply a non-starter for the industry and, of course, a non-starter for the Gulf countries and for Washington, D.C. as well.
Dan, just quickly, I was going to ask you about that because the Iranians made a big point about a cargo ship the other week that had not gone on the route that they had designated. Was that one of the reasons because of the implications of still mined parts of the strait?
That's right. So there are active mines inside Hormuz. The US has been embarking on an operation to try and clear them out. At the same time, the routes inside the Strait of Hormuz are interesting to watch too, because the Iranians are suggesting one way, the Omanis are suggesting another, and who ultimately has the control here moving forward is probably one of the biggest sticking points in the talks that are going to take place in Doha today.
Dan, fascinating. Thank you so much. Coming up on the show, we'll discuss the outlook for IPOs in Europe with the CEO of Euronext, Stefan Büchner. Plus, ECB President Christine Lagarde opens the Sintra Forum, defending June's rate hike as necessary to fend off inflation pressures. More from our coverage of the Sintra Forum this hour. And we'll hear from the CEO of Covestro as the company announces plans to expand its Shanghai site. That interview is coming up at 8:30 BST.
Executive Decisions is the new podcast from CNBC, where I ask powerful leaders about their decisions that changed everything. I'm Steve Sedgwick. Here's the CEO of the London Stock Exchange Group, Julia Hoggett.
There is no justification whatsoever for not doing the right thing, even if the right thing is hard to do. Which also means that if the context changes or the information changes, it is absolutely fine to also change your mind.
That's Executive Decisions with me, Steve Sedgwick. Get it wherever you're listening to this.
US Supreme Court has rejected President Trump's attempt to fire Fed Governor Lisa Cook over unproven allegations of mortgage fraud. In a landmark 5-4 ruling, the court stipulated that the administration had not provided Cook sufficient due process, affirming that a president can only remove a governor of the Federal Reserve, quote, for cause. The ruling came down at the same time as the Supreme Court rolled back protection for other US agencies, backing President Trump's firing of Democratic Federal Trade Commission member Rebecca Slaughter and expanding his powers over other independent agencies. Let's move on to markets and what we saw in trade yesterday. Gains across the board. Some of the tech stocks are snapping back into positive territory and much firmer finish for the Nasdaq, 2% higher. You saw it in some of the FANG Plus stocks, some of the communication services plays and the semiconductor stocks all marking higher. VanEck up 3.3%, so reversing some of the steep falls from a week earlier. What we saw in the Asian markets today, picking up on that green. Now, this has been the picture so far, bookended by those markets that are very big tech plays. The Japanese stock market and South Korea are both rallying more than 1%, so much stronger days. Hong Kong market is up or down 0.75%, but the Chinese market is high. And interesting data about some of the stockpiling that is happening from the US retailers ahead of key seasons later this year, Black Friday and of course Christmas. So perhaps bolstering the fortunes of the Chinese stock market today. What we're seeing on dollar yen, closely watch for intervention. We've dwindled to levels not seen since 1986. There is a lot of market watchers anticipating there could be some sort of move here from authorities to shore up the currency. And a look at how we're perched across on futures here in Europe and the United States. First up, Europe, we're looking firmer, chasing about 0.6 on 50 futures on the back of a day that was just modestly firmer yesterday, barely in the green on the Stock 600, and US futures now on the back of those very strong gains. We are seeing leaning higher, as you can see. It is going to be a positive start at this stage.
Karen, joining us now is a wonderful guest, Stefan Bujna, who is the CEO of Euronext. Stefan, thank you for joining Karen and myself this morning. I was going to start off in one direction, but I read an article this morning from Ruchir Sharma in the Financial Times, and he's writing about the single factor now dictating the hierarchy of global returns, which is, of course, he calls it the new AI-based world order, and he's the chair of the Rockefeller International Group as well. Europe has pockets of technological excellence, some of the companies on the Euronext, but by and large we're still industrially based, or we're based in other sectors rather than this dominant AI thematic we're seeing in places like South Korea, like in the United States. Is that a strength or a weakness?
I think, first of all, I live in Europe. I don't live in a division called Europe, Middle East and Africa. I live in Europe, so I do believe it's a strength. I think one factor which is a bit underestimated, which is blurring us in this AI revolution, is the fact that, yes, like the previous one, it's all about big players, large players, concentration of hyperscalers. But on the other hand, it's also extremely fast. And incumbent positions are being shaken every quarter in reality. So that's the main edge of Europe. We may not be as big, but we are as fast as the other ones. Now, to what extent massive investment do have an impact on speed is to be debated. But what we can observe is that just like in China, in Europe, you have players below the radar screen that are outside of the radar screen that are making the difference. And the Anthropic cloud fable crisis did provide an opportunity to accelerate the development of flash, crash, alternative providers developments, and that happened in Europe over the past few weeks. So I'm optimistic because we have the talents, we have the science, we have the money. What we don't have is the speed and scale, but speed is encapsulated in this very specific technological revolution, which is fundamentally different from the cloud, from the internet momentum.
2 points here from having just come off the back of a big technology event in France. One of the takeaways is that we don't have the money, that there's still a problem in terms of scaling companies very quickly. The other point is just how much intervention is now required from different governments. France has done some of it, trying to pivot homegrown talent into the picture, particularly around cybersecurity. What's one of the latest decisions concerns around cutting Palantir out of domestic services eventually around AI and putting a French company. What do we need to see in terms of intervention, number one, and number two, still on the capital side?
On the capital side, the issue is more channeling. I mean, we have 13 trillion of savings, one of the highest level of savings in the planet. The question is, most of it is invested in govies and not into equity. So the issue and the single the savings investment union project in Europe is getting a huge momentum and is about channeling this money to those risky projects. On the other topic, I think the governments are just adapting to a world that we haven't chosen. Europe was the paradise of a happy globalization, and Europe was all about promoting happy globalization. Some people in China, in the US, and in Russia have decided that this era is over, so we have to adjust. And we have to adjust because in a world where the US can switch at any time, not only the F-35 fighting jet, but also the Anthropic Cloud Fable crypto platforms, you have to build your own resources. Hence, the sort of reaction in several countries, in France, in Denmark, in Norway, which is fundamentally different from what they would have been just 3 years ago.
So what you're saying is that Europe needs a frontier model, because that seemed to be the wash-up as mythos and fable could be switched off. Brussels was saying, how do we not have an entire stack? We could be cut off from A, cloud services, and B, frontier models. Do you think Europe needs a frontier model?
Well, Europe has to reinvent platforms because, when you get dumped, you have two options. Either you go to the gym and you phone all your friends, or you sit on the couch and you eat ice cream in front of Netflix. So these are options. Europeans have decided not to sit on the couch and not to eat ice cream. Europeans have decided to go to the gym. And that's what is happening. We are, whatever the starting point is, we are trying to activate all the resources we have to be in charge of our own future. To use a London-based concept, Europeans are forced to take back control.
I like the storytelling, but I wondered whether Europe was eating the ice cream while going to the gym, so sort of sabotaging itself.
No, I love the analogy. I'm going to try and get them to clip that for .com as well. Look, we have other strengths, and I mentioned the industrial companies we have as well, and they're thinking about how they repurpose themselves in the 21st century, how our defence companies, for instance, proliferate in this environment as well. But there's been a bit of a hiccup as of late with German orders, British orders, and as the defence departments think about what is fit for the 21st century rather than just having main battle tanks or large frigates and what have you. Despite, I think you want to talk about the defence sector as well, despite the strengths of it as well, are we still doing that thing that generals do, which is fighting the last war rather than the current or the next war?
Well, it's very difficult to, unfortunately, in those matters, only the battlefield decides what war you fight. So I think what is important is to create a deterrence. If you want to remain free and to have a way of life, we need to be feared. And if we want to be feared, we need to be powerful and mighty. And if you want to be powerful and mighty, you need to spend money. So I think you need to deter the bad guys, the hostiles. And probably you need both. You need both large platforms, nuclear submarine, aircraft carriers, and those large projects that allow you to project forces and strength, and also massive, good enough, low-cost entry points platforms like drones. So this is the new evolution, the fact that you need to cover the full scope. But again, Europeans have done it. In 1914, we started the war with the invention of Air Force made of wood and fabrics, and with people from cavalry officers, and it took 4 years to reinvent a completely organization.
But I guess I'm trying to tie the two thematics. Is the defence sector an example, actually, of Europe going to the gym rather than sitting on that bus eating the ice cream?
When you look at companies like CSG in Czechoslovakia, in the Czech Republic, when you look at Rheinmetall, when you look at Airbus, KNDS, which is going to be listed now, when you look at companies like Kongsberg, when you look at companies like Leonardo, and so on and so forth, and the Safran of this world, and the Dassault of this world, and the Thales of this world, and all these Finmeccanica and all these companies, you have a depth of technology, of export markets across the world, and of innovation which is quite amazing. Now, like everything in Europe, the optical illusion is that it is fragmented. So I think we are ahead of us. We have a wave of consolidation of all those players, not necessarily the ones I've mentioned, but their suppliers, their providers are in the process of working towards consolidation plans to get to speed and scale, which are the two metrics that are required for the next few months.
It's really interesting as we talk about sovereignty in the context, whether it's defence sovereignty or tech sovereignty, because what we've seen on markets has been the opposite. It's been almost a coupling. So in particular, I'm citing the South Korean market and the dominance of a handful of names that seems to have dominance now across other world indices. And last week was really as symbolic of the fact that you had these stocks moving very aggressively to the upside, dragging other stock markets with them in the same sectors, then selling off aggressively. European stocks as well went with some of those names. What do you make of some of the risks now that we're seeing out there?
We are living within public markets what we live in our domestic economies. In our domestic economies, we have a national index, the FTSE, the CAC 40, whatever, the MIB, and they represent only large listed companies, and they don't represent the full economy. And there is always a discrepancy between what is happening to next door SMEs and what is happening to FTSE companies. We are used to that buyers. Now, within the listed world, we are now seeing the emergence of a group of global tax collectors. Global companies that have such a huge pricing power that their life, their size, their management, their global reach, their pricing power has nothing to do with the rest of listed companies. So we have a sort of parallel discrepancy between those few hyperscalers, the rest of the listed companies, as we have within listed companies, the gap between listed companies and the rest of the economy. So I think this is what it is. But again, just the Jimmo versus, we can complain or we can act. So this is what it is. We need to, as Europeans, to build something which is strong, consistent, and as autonomous as possible. We are never going to get rid of the happy globalization. We are mourning and grieving happy globalization, and we are adjusting to a world we have not chosen, which is the world of Putin, Xi Jinping, and Trump. This is the world they have chosen to impose on us. But we have all the resources in Europe. When I mean in Europe, I mean people who are like-minded, not only Europeans of the EU, because for the purpose of that discussion, the UK is part of Europe, as it is part of the European geography and history anyway. So we as Europeans have all the resources to try and build this type of future. And that's what we're trying with integrated capital markets, with companies like Euronext, with companies like Airbus, with institutions like the European Central Bank. And it's difficult because it's a bottom-up project. It's not easy. It's never easy. But do we have any alternative? I mean, Britons never shall be slaves.